Hi, everybody. Welcome to Truth Teller Tales. I am Ellen, and I am honored and privileged to have on the show today Major General Paul Vallely, who, among many other things that we'll find out,
It's actually
led.
Vallely.
How do you pronounce it? Vallely.
Vallely.
Vallely. I love it.
There
That's
you
actually
go.
beautiful. That's beautiful. Vallely. Beautiful. Um, I knew who you are, but I didn't really quite grasp the psychological and civil military operations you were involved with, the commanding the 351st Civil Affairs Command, and we're going to go over all of that because you're a force and you have books. You founded an incredibly important nonprofit foundation called Stand Up America U.S. Foundation, and that so your service, even though you're retired from the military, has never ended. And I will just sort of start with saying thank you from me and everybody who is watching. Um, it's beyond
Thank you.
comprehension what you have done and continue to do, and we're forever grateful. So I just at least want to start there. Um, and so with that being said, I want to hear everything, but I really want to first just start out to learn about you and your life and where you were born and how this all started for you. If you could take me back to the beginning, that would be wonderful.
Well, I'll try to capsule it as best I can. I was born in Du Bois, Pennsylvania, and then as I matriculated into high school, we didn't have any money at that time, and so I was looking for scholarships in football or basketball or any place that would accept me. So I finally got accepted at Penn State University and the University of Michigan in aeronautical engineering. But
Oh,
1 month
wow.
after high school, then I got notified by Washington that I was accepted at West Point in the class that went in 19 July actually of 1957, and graduated from West Point in 1961. Went into the infantry, served 2 tours in Vietnam. Of course, then got involved in a lot of national security affairs as I matriculated to full colonel, and then brigadier, and then major general. My last assignment was the deputy commanding general of the U.S. Army Pacific out of Honolulu, Hawaii. And after that time, of course, then I retired. And then as we moved forward, after 9/11, Roger Ailes at Fox News called me up and offered me a contract 1 week after 9/11. So I was with Fox
Mhm.
News for 8 years. And then in, I guess it was 2025, somewhere around there, General McInerney and I and Admiral Ace Lyons founded the Citizens Commission for Benghazi, which later became Citizens Commission for National Security. And that's national security. There's a website for that. And then we founded the Stand Up America U.S. Foundation, which has
Mhm.
been around now for 20 some years. And so we do a lot. We do a lot of analysis. We provided
Mhm.
President Trump studies on how to take down the cartels going on the offense. And that was in 2018 in his first term. And now he's finally doing it. And then also the reorganization of the Pentagon and our warfighting capability. And so we gave a plan to Trump on that early on in the administration. And that was actually during the first term. And then it was carried forward now, of course, into the second term. And I think we all heard Secretary Hegseth in the gathering of the generals and admirals this week in Quantico, Virginia. So
Mhm.
now our books are all on our website, standupamericaus.org. And
Yes.
basically, it really pinpoint the treason that's been done by Americans.
Mhm.
Biden, Obama, Milley. I mean, you go. The list is there. McCabe, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, and so President Trump is using our books on who what is treason and who's conducted treason.
Wow. I
So anyhow,
so I have so many questions for you, but I want to back up too with your childhood, um,
right.
because I think people are so curious. So is it did you have siblings? Were you the kid in school that strived for good grades? Were you rebellious? What were you like as a kid?
Well, we lost. My father left us when I was about 12 years old, so I never really had a father in my life. I never had any male influence until I got to West Point. So that's
Wow.
why when I was a freshman in high school, I started looking ahead and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so I became an A student and studied hard. And of course, as I said earlier, was accepted into two universities in aeronautical engineering, which I really wanted to do. And that was sort of back at the beginning of the space age. Then, of course, I put in for West Point, Annapolis, and would have gone to either one, but I was selected for West Point and went there, of course, July 2nd, 1957. So it was an interesting time coming from a family where we didn't have any money, though I did have aunts and uncles who would have paid for me to go to Penn State or to the University of Michigan. But to be able to get the scholarship, so to speak, to West Point, where
Right.
uh, I was able to go there, and I didn't require any funding from the family members. The
Yeah.
U.S. government sort of adopted me then, and I
Yeah.
can remember when I graduated in '61, we were paid $211 a month. That was our salary as a second lieutenant.
Oh my goodness. That is and the memory that you have to understand those numbers all the way back then too is crazy. And so I have a couple questions with that. So you had mentioned that you were going to Penn State and you said for football. So were you an athlete?
Yes, football, basketball, yeah.
And so and that's interesting too. So would you think that being in that environment gave you the father figures as the coaches during that time?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, to be involved in competitive sports at that time was very challenging. And I wanted to be challenged, that for sure. I knew I had certain skills, physical skills. I was a fairly good athlete, but I pursued education and sports. And that's where I learned the disciplines that I did even before I got to West Point.
And so you said it was because of the time, but what as a high school kid, and you said you wanted to go for aeronautical engineering, is that correct?
Right.
What in a kid's head, where did that come from?
Well, I always enjoyed science. And again, at that period of time is when the first space launches were occurring by the Russians. We were developing a space program at that time. And then I had studied my last year at West Point, space engineering, as they called it at that time. And one of my instructors at West Point was Frank Borman, for example, who became an astronaut. He was a teacher of mine, Air Force captain at the time. But so that all matriculated, from high school and transmitted, I guess, translated, I should say, into the academic requirements at West Point. So it was all a fit that just kept progressing. And I was very young. The average college education in my West Point class was 2 years. They'd been
Wow.
college experience. Yeah, and I came in 1 month out of high school, so I was playing catch up at West Point quite a bit my first years because it was very demanding, particularly in mathematics, because West Point, as you may know, Ellen, was the first engineering school in America, founded in
Okay.
1802 by John Adams and George Washington to be the engineer school for the Continental Army, to build bridges, to build roads. And
Wow.
the first cadets at West Point, I think there were 12 in 1802. And of
Wow.
course, the Naval Academy didn't come to be until 1842,
Hmm. That
and
is
Air Force
fascinating.
became in the 1950s. So But all my instructors at West Point at that time, tactical officers, were all veterans from World War II and Korea. And boy, what outstanding officers! They were my mentors that I learned from, the World War II generals.
Hmm.
And when I looked at what's happened in those several decades with all these generals and admirals that have gone woke and let
Right.
them be manipulated by left-wing politics of Obama and Biden. Uh,
Yep.
and that's why this meeting in Quantico by Pete Hegseth was so important this week to get back on track.
Yes. And I want to talk about all of that. It's so exciting that we have this opportunity to talk and I ask my general questions. And so that's so fascinating. So at West Point, you had great leadership and you were motivated, even though you were right out of high school. It was
Right.
challenging, obviously. And so right after that, um, what did you do right after that?
Well, I went into the infantry school in August of 1961, then went to Ranger School and then Airborne School, and then I was assigned to a paratroop unit in Germany at the height of the Cold War. And so I spent 3 years in Germany with an airborne unit, of course, then came back, and then 5 months later went on my first tour to Vietnam in 1965.
Oh my word. And so I'm sure it's just too much to talk about all of your experience there in Vietnam, but generally, what was the time there? I just very generally, what was your feeling psychologically, since that's your specialty is psychology? What was that whole
Well,
event
not at
like for
that
you?
time. It was infantry. I
Okay.
didn't, I didn't get into psychological operations till I was a colonel, much later in my career.
Okay.
But it was impactful because I was with one of the first units to go to Vietnam, and then I became an aide to the field commander, three-star general. But I can remember September 1965, very early on in Vietnam, where I'm sitting at a table. I'm the captain, sort of running the house where the generals stayed. And my boss at dinner, he looks around at the other two generals and some full colonels, and he says, I don't know why we're here. That was early in the fall, 1965. He said, these people,
Wow.
Vietnam is no threat to us. What the hell are we doing here? It's all political. And as it turned out, that's what it was, an unnecessary war, totally unnecessary. And then Bush took us into the Middle East, total unnecessary war. Iraq was never a threat to us. And then we got embroiled with 20 years in Afghanistan. But we didn't, when you look back, we hadn't won a war since World War II.
Right.
Korea was a stalemate. No, we didn't win there. We're still there after all these years. And so you learn that you got to be very discerning when you make the decision to go to war or not go to war. And that sort of has guided me over the years in the books I've written and
Right.
the many times on television and radio to try to explain that we got to be very careful when we commit our young men and women in a combat situation or combat environment.
So when you were told that by your boss basically in Vietnam,
Yeah.
why do you think you understood and heard that? I think that there's a lot of brave people who enter the military who didn't see that, couldn't see that was actually the case. Why do you think you could?
Well, I mean, we were all given orders. We were assigned to units to go to Vietnam to serve our country at that time based on what was created by Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the president at that time, and the total inept Robert McNamara, who was Secretary of Defense, didn't have a clue about anything other than when he was at Ford Motor Company. And his claim to fame was the Etzel, as you may
Yeah.
remember. And of course,
Yes.
that didn't do very well. But and it was just a group of people that they wouldn't listen to my boss, a three-star. General Westmoreland was the commanding general of Vietnam at that time. but we're all taking orders. And I was very naive. I'd never been to war before. But I got a feeling from my boss at that time as we looked and tried to see what the hell was going on in the battlefield. And then I became an advisor to the Vietnamese Army um, in my second tour. That was 1967 and 68. And then I came back from that. And anyhow, it was 2 years out of my life, but it was an experience of learning.
Yeah, and so let me ask you because it's just so interesting to me. So, obviously those were very volatile times,
Yeah.
with so much happening in our country as well. Were you at the time someone that questioned everything? Like when Kennedy was assassinated, did you question what happened there? I mean, what was that your way of thinking always?
Well, that was November, yeah, 19, what, 63. And I was
Hmm.
in Germany still at that time when we got the news about Kennedy. And we had President Kennedy in Germany that summer and had a big parade and celebration for him in Hanau, Germany. And that was, and then of course, a few months later, he was assassinated. Um, yeah, I mean, and I still wonder myself how I got involved in so many things in my career that I hadn't
Yeah.
planned to do, but they sort of evolved.
So I want to even go back to your grade school. So because you were you the person that questioned things in school, even questioned the narrative there, uh what things were being taught, or did that not come till
No,
later? Because
schools
I
all
just
no schools all together back in the 50s. I mean, it was arithmetic, English, the basic courses. That's what we had. We didn't have all these social crap that we've seen entered into the education system today. It was
yeah,
pure learning how to speak, how to write, how to
right,
talk,
yeah,
science, very important, mathematics. We even had a wood shop, the skill of being able to carve wood and make lamps and do things. Many of the
yeah,
older generation would remember the wood shops we had in high school. But then
yes,
we had all the sports programs. I mean, the 1950s were wonderful to grow up in, I can
mm,
tell you. I'm not sure what
yeah,
year you were born, and I won't ask, but anyhow, I remember the 50s and General Eisenhower became president. It's a pretty wonderful time to grow up. We weren't clouded
well,
by all this other crap, this social stuff that's going on today that completely confuses many of our young people. It's just horrible what's
yes.
going on today in our education system, but that's being corrected.
That's what I was going to ask you, what your thoughts about that, if you thought that we're going to be going in a different direction here in the future in the positive way.
Oh, we are. We're definitely going in a positive direction. I mean, even though they were going to do away with the Department of Education, I think they reassess that. And the focus on the Department of Education on Washington is on technical schools, not the
Oh,
four-year
okay.
college and universities that have squandered so much money. Um,
Right.
and so that's very important that we teach skills now, not only the high-tech skills, but getting back to being able to be a welder, a builder, electrician, and they pay
Yes,
pretty good wages today, by the way.
they do.
So that's really
Absolutely.
what it is. But trying to put education back with the states and local governments has been very important.
So this is just me being a lady in Virginia, but it's just I'm so fascinated by this. So back after West Point, one of the things you said you did was paratrooping.
Right.
What the heck? I mean, so I mean, it sounds like you've been pretty fearless your entire life, with everything. Um, where did that come from with
It
you?
just it either comes. I mean, I always wanted to take the ultimate challenge, and I can remember my first jump at Fort Benning, Georgia. And even though it was daylight, we called it a night jump because you jumped out and you closed your eyes and just hoped the
Yeah,
parachute opened up. And then all of a sudden there's the sky and you're dropping 1,500 feet to the ground. But I parachuted all over. I parachuted into Turkey, into Denmark, throughout many jumps in France were practice jumps. But yeah, that was very challenging. Jumped out of
Yes.
helicopters, fixed wing, C-130s.
Was there ever a time in all of the things that you know, in that you've been challenged with physically, things like that, where you just for a minute said, I nope, or was it always, yeah, I'm gonna I could do this.
Well, I just accepted what it was, and that was the training at West Point that prepared me for that. And I can remember the last shot fired at me in Vietnam. It was 12 inches in front of my left foot. I had a hand grenade thrown on me that didn't go off. I had many near-death experiences in Vietnam. Why I
Oh,
survived them, and we lost over 58,000 of our young people and older people in Vietnam. 58,000.
yes, it's devastating, devastating. Um, and so tell me now, after uh years went by and then you start what part of the psychological side of things interested you and when did that all start?
Well, it didn't interest me. I had a full colonel that asked me if I wanted to command one of his units. And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to. But I was a lieutenant colonel then when I got introduced into psychological operations. And it just happened. And of course, at that time, and then I became probably the chief PSYOP, strategic psychological operations at the Pentagon.
And so when you're learning all of that and I hope my questions aren't so naive, too naive,
Oh,
but
that's all right.
do they take you back to psychological operations in previous wars to learn about that?
Sure,
How
absolutely.
does that, yeah, so how did that
Well,
look?
we had to go back to World War II if people remembered in the invasion of Normandy. The psychological operations laid onto the Nazi generals and Hitler that we were going to attack north uh, of Normandy and and Calais and up north, basically across from the English Channel. And so that was a psyop operation because then they attacked in Normandy way to the south in France. And so but you go back, we studied the Romans. The Romans used psychological operations with the Roman legions. And so it was always and you go back to even the Chinese, who were very good at that kind of warfare, psychological warfare. So it's always been around, trying to outthink the enemy, trying to plant, well, I'm going to attack here, but then I end up attacking there. And so they become diversions. And so you put the enemy basically in a position where you confuse them. They don't know what you're going to do. And that's the strength today. Of course, that's what's been used in cyber today, cyber attacks, information management, they call it now. And we're in the information age. So we see psychological operations going on all the time with Russia, China, other countries, ourselves. Uh, and so that's what strategic psychological operations have led to today. Again, they're calling it information management.
That's so interesting. And so when I was studying some of the things you've done, is it correct that back, I think it was 1980, that was the seventh PSYOP group, the Mind War, the Psychology of Victory.
Right.
What was that? A paper?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting story. I don't
I'd
know
love to
whether I
hear it.
want to surface it again. I'm trying to get away from that story, but
Oh,
I was asked by the Pentagon to develop a psychological plan, psychological operation plan against the Russians, who were very good at that time. And so I hired, I shouldn't say hired, I had four of my staff officers develop the Mind War plan, and that's what it was called. And it was presented to the Pentagon. but it was so powerful they wouldn't even publish it. That was in 1988. Yeah,
Wow. I mean, in 1988. So,
right.
what did that make you think then that they didn't publish it?
I don't know. They just wouldn't they even the War College wouldn't publish it. It was just a powerful way to neutralize the Russian propaganda. Who
Wow.
knows? I don't know. They never told me why, but that
So
whole
when,
paper's lived on even up till today.
yeah, I mean, that it's obviously still talked about online, because that's how I
Right.
I found it, which is so interesting. And so when you're leading these psychological operations, do you have a team that you're also still teaching? Are these people that have also been through the psychological understanding of what's happening and what's happened in the past? Is how does that look?
Well, at that time, most of the psychological operation training, we had the group out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which was the lead psychological operations group. But it was printing leaflets, for example. You remember that in the past where they dropped leaflets out of an
Yeah.
airplane that had a message on it? That was
Yes.
all psycho, and that was all done out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And then broadcasting. And then we had our people go in when Noriega was taken down. He was in the Catholic church there uh, in Panama, Noriega, and our guys played rock and roll music outside the Catholic church. And he came out the next morning and gave up. That was all psychological operations. You listen to some of
Yes,
that old music, it'd drive you crazy if you listened to it all night. Drove him out of the church the next morning.
that's
So,
too awesome. And so what would you say, because your books that you've written and things, you're understanding a lot. I'm sure you always have, but you're getting that out of the deception of things that are happening
yeah.
in our country and around the world. What were some of the events that really, would you say, opened your eyes to things that just were not what they were inferred to be
Well, I'll go
about the
back to
world?
the late '60s. Students for Democratic Action in Berkeley, the anti-Vietnam War. That's where a lot of this started, and a lot of this left-wing uh, recruitment into our universities of these left-wing professors. That started in the
Mhm.
late '80s, and it fostered on up until now. And so
Right.
when they develop all these communist ideologies and try to put them in effect, like this young man that's running for governor, not governor, but of the mayor of New York, then
Yes.
you see these left wing AOCs and these
Mhm.
Muslim ladies that are in Congress, Talib and what's her name, Omar Iman. I can never pronounce her name.
Yes,
These are all radical leftist communists, and they're trying to
they
infiltrate. And
are.
they've done that in Minnesota. All these
Yes.
Somalis have come in. Many of them come in illegally, and the best thing they can do is Elon Omar is send her back to Somalia. And Trump said he
Mhm.
asked the president of Somalia when he was there, "Do you want her?" And he said, "No, we don't want her."
How sad is that? So, I'd love to get your take because you understand the layers of deception and the infiltration, that we've been, um, our country's been dealing with. Where do you think those layers are all going to start to unravel? I know they're already starting to unravel, but
Yeah.
how do you think psychologically the best way, without freaking everybody out, the general public, to psychologically unravel all of what's been happening?
Don't try to solve these problems politically. One of my first books was Reality Prism. You cannot solve these problems by looking through a political prism. You have to look at a reality prism. And that's what Trump does. He looks at the problem, comes up with a solution void of politics. If I could get rid of two words, it would be politics and political parties.
Mhm.
I'd do away with political parties. I don't think we need them anymore. with our high tech approaches and everything AI, we can bring people in to be our new leaders, uh, pushed up and promoted up by the people in our local communities, our states, and so on. I'd just like to see political parties go away. They're partisan, they don't accomplish anything, too difficult for them to ever solve a problem, just like we see what's happened in the government this week. So, but there's a lot of
Yes.
changes I would make, and we're trying to get most of these ideas to President Trump as best we can.
And 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 so the things the psychological areas where you led, obviously you can see that this is all still going on. The psychological war may be changing as we get
Right,
more technologically advanced, right?
right,
But it's still there, and there's
yeah,
basic psychology no matter how technology changes.
sure.
What are your thoughts on how that, as somebody who is so well versed in this and had such strong leadership with this, what would you say is your thoughts about what is happening right now psychologically?
You have to be a cognitive thinker. Okay, you have to be a deep thinker today.
Hmm.
You've got to study. You've got to read. I spend at least an hour or two every day reading.
Hmm.
Okay. I try to look at things not through any political prism. Ever, I will ever look through a political prism. I'll
Right.
always look through the reality prism. And if you look at my book, Reality Prism, the whole story is in there. And just a short story when I went to Egypt in 2014 to meet General Al Sisi after the second revolution there, when they ousted Morsi, the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, who was elected president, and they threw him out. And so General Al Sisi was the head of the armed forces there. And so my team went over to meet with him and get a briefing and so on. And so we're sitting in General Al Sisi's room, his command headquarters in Cairo. And off to my right were, I think, 10 or 12 generals who were on General Al Sisi's staff. And they were just irate that Obama had cut off the military aid. And he says, you know, we've been partners for 40 years. We've been allies. And then your Congress and Obama cuts off our aid. We got your helicopters. We got your arms. We need your supplies. And Joel Sisi said, I've got to look to the Sinai, working with the Israelis. I've got to rebuild the economy. I've got to rebuild our armed forces again. And he said, I've got failing nations, Somalia to my south, Libya to my west. I'm responsible for the Suez Canal and our part in the Mediterranean Sea. And he turned to me and he says, why does America always seem to want to solve its problems through a political prism rather than a reality prism? And boy, was that an epiphany. I came back on the airplane. I said, I got to write a book on this. And that became the book Reality Prism.
Wow. And to to that point, isn't that all purposeful psychologically?
Absolutely. Everything we do. Take off these political hats and blinders. Look at the problem, come up with a solution. Get rid of these politics at the local level that guide things in our local governments. You know, there's just all sorts of work we have to do to rebuild our country. And one of my last books is called The Dismantling of America.
Hmm. And that will be showing all of those and give all the information to in all the details here. Um, so this is just so fascinating to me. You know, someone who is as fearless as you are, some headlines stick out with you, of course, when you go online.
Mhm.
One was that, you know, you were vocal about um, the citizenship status of Obama,
Mhm.
and during a time when everybody was head over heels in love with him. Um, Tell me
A few,
about
not
that.
some of us weren't.
Exactly, but very few. But tell me about
We
that,
saw him.
because that's
We saw him as an empty suit, just like Clint Eastwood when he had that blank chair next to him. That was an empty
yeah,
suit chair.
yes.
I don't know
I
whether
mean,
you remember that or not.
Oh, I do. And don't you think that that was a psychological operation, the whole Obama thing? I would love your take on all of that.
Well, he's totally incompetent. Islamist made that terrible speech in Cairo when he went over to the Middle East.
And do you think that he was, purposefully brought on
Yes, he was a
the
puppet,
Mhm.
just like Biden was a puppet.
Mm,
And a lot of people don't
absolutely.
realize when Obama went out of office, he had this home in Colorado about a mile and a half from the White House, and he set up
That's
what we call a skiff in his basement there in that home, and basically he was issuing orders to the Biden administration, and he did that because he put Susan Rice, I think it was on the second floor of the executive office building, right next to the White House, and so Obama would send over instructions to Susan Rice. She would then pass them on. I think Ron Klain then was the chief of staff, and Ron Klain would tell Biden what to do. And Harris, of course, was clueless. But that's why Biden. I mean, he was just a puppet run by Obama and the globalists.
so when you were involved in the military with all of this, and before Donald Trump came
Right.
um, as our president, what were your thoughts about the path with which we were going? Did you see a light at this tunnel before he came aboard? I mean, what were you thinking
Well,
our country was going?
well, when Jimmy Carter took over, you could see a degrading in our military. I think I was lieutenant colonel or colonel then. So we could see what was happening. We weren't getting the support we needed. And then President Reagan came in and rebuilt our military at that time. And so we were trying to get back to where we were with the leadership that we had in World War II. But it became obvious that we were moving to a different kind of armed forces. And then all these social programs, LBGQ and CRT, DEI, and all that stuff crept in because of Biden and Obama. And of course, now we're back on the right track again. So we saw all of those things. And again, we were grooming generals and admirals that couldn't win a war. They're more interested in a lot of these social programs. That's not all of them, but the four stars guided all of that stuff, taking orders from the likes of a Milley. He should be charged for treason, what he did. I can remember Milley testifying in front of the Senate. He said the biggest threat are these white ring extremists military. Excuse me. And I came back and said the only white terrorism extremism I see is General Milley.
Yeah,
We call him
my
Fat Belly,
goodness.
by the way, and that's why Pete Higgs is going to trim down all these guys who've gotten so fat over the years, out of shape. Yeah,
And you talk about the ebbs and the flows of getting us in the right direction, having it.
right.
Do you think we're finally reaching a time in history where we're going to be able to actually break through the psyop and not have to go back again? That we're not going to be swinging back and forth again with what you say, reality and truth, and then these psyops. I mean, are we entering a new
Well, that's
era,
why
do
the
you think?
meeting in Quantico this week with Pete Hegseth and President Trump being there is to gather the new generals, the existing generals and admirals, and put them on a track to be warfighters to protect America and American citizens. We now have three new dimensions to warfare. World War II, Korea was basically land, sea, and air. Now we've added three new dimensions to warfare: cyber, bio, and space. Now satellites going to be armed with nuclear weapons. They can go over a particular area, and by computer, they can designate a target, put the coordinates in, and they can send a nuclear bomb directly over a city. That's where we're at, and that's why the gathering the generals and admirals was very important to really look at what changes do we have to make, what kind of new equipment do we need. We're not going to need the old tanks that we had in World War II in Korea and Vietnam. A lot is in space today. So drones, for example, new form of warfare that we see being in the Ukraine-Russia confrontation there. So it's a whole new changing world, and that's what Pete Hegseth and Trump wanted to do to make sure we're all on the same track. What kind of weapons do we need? What kind of units do we need? Formations? What kind of policies do we need? That's what they've discussed in Quantico this week.
And so, along with that, do you also think that they're strategizing how to bring these changes to the public?
Yeah.
Because people, as psychologically, since you're such an expert on this, that how they're dealing with the presentation to the public psychologically.
Well, the biggest test right now is the internal threats. And I was going to mention earlier, we're always concerned about external threats to the United States. The biggest threat to the United States now is internal, from the Antifas, all these left-wing organizations that we've seen in Portland, Oregon, for example. And so now, to complement, as we've seen the big improvement in Washington D.C. By using our National Guard to complement and to assist the police forces in rooting out criminals. And the criminality in these cities is unbelievable. They're in Memphis, Tennessee now. They're in Portland. National Guard being called up to go in and support the police in cleaning up, getting rid of all these homeless tents in our cities, downtown Portland, for example, Los Angeles. So Trump is really focused on cleaning up our cities,
Mm-hmm.
cleansing it of these criminal activities, these criminal people, these young teenage gangs. They need to be cleaned up.
Absolutely. And then the other side of things are there's many in the educational institutions, higher education even, where
Right.
people feel like they are the most educated, yet they are the most psychologically brainwashed as far as I'm
Well, they're
concerned.
brainwashed.
And
It's tremendous. Yeah. These
and
young
they're teaching,
professors they have that have been
yes,
propagandized, and they're teaching by other left wing. And I say, I look back at emanated from the late 60s. Berkeley,
and yes, sir, and they're still teaching. I mean, how is that all going to be dismantled, psychologically?
leadership at the universities that focus on education and the truth, not ideologies.
That's right. And but don't you see that that the infiltration is so many layered that
Overwhelming.
it's going and it is overwhelming. And so I think about it and wonder how it is going to be penetrated in a way, in a good way, with those people with which you speak.
New
It
leadership. It's all about leadership.
it
It's
is.
well, who heads up our universities? How have they structured these young men and women to be able to add to the advancement in technologies and
Right.
how you manage the administrations in our local cities, our towns, our states, and again focusing on solutions. If we have a problem in education somewhere, how are we going to solve that? Do we have to bring in more mature, educated teachers? Do we have to have a reformation of the facilities of how we teach? Um, and it's a major challenge. It's going to take us a while to get there, but we are going to get there. I firmly believe that we're on the right track.
I do too. I just can't quite figure out how it's going to be done, but money still talks, and a lot of those colleges
Mhm.
that where money comes involved, maybe that'll change my. I don't know, but I
It
do
is
agree with
changing.
you.
It is changing. They've cut off funds to a lot of these universities.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Yes. And to your point, this has been going on for so long. It's
right.
just not going to happen overnight, right?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm just so excited to be spending time with you. I can't tell you. I can't tell you. Um,
Well, I
but I'd
don't
love
know it
to know.
all, Ellen. I don't know it all. I just, after 85 years, I have my own opinions and outlook on solutions. I'm strictly solution oriented.
You are, and you've been fearless, obviously, your whole life, and you've also taken that way of thinking to find solutions. And because of that, you were able to cut through what other
Yeah.
people just could not and cannot see. And that, along with your leadership and your you just being a hero to so many because of your strength and your fortitude is thank God for you in our country. And I can't tell you how grateful so many of us are. So now I do want to talk about your books, but I also want to talk about your thoughts because you mentioned it about those folks who have committed treason and
Yes.
how you think that's going to play out. Obviously, it's starting with Comey, I guess,
Right.
and they're psychologically, I think Trump is throwing out the Obamas and the Hillarys and things like that to get
No,
that
he's
in
not.
people's frame of
Yeah,
mind.
he's thrown it out because they conducted treason, aiding and abetting enemies of the United States, foreign and domestic. They're
Yes,
guilty. There's no doubt about it. Dismantle the United States through
yes.
what they've done. I mean, it's not
Don't
retribution, but they do have to pay for dismantling this country and trying to tear it apart, which they've done.
do you see that happening sooner than later?
It's happening already. Comey's the first
Ex-
one. Brennan, you're going to
Excellent.
see Clapper. I don't know how they're going to handle Biden. Biden's gone anyhow. He's bye bye. But Obama, I mean, that guy started it all with. I just don't want to go
Yeah.
into all of it. So ashamed that we elected that SOB to, if I may say that on air, to the White
Yes.
House.
Yes, but you have to, you know more than anybody that was such a psychological psyop. And to your point, one of your books has a cover on it. There is COVID on there, which is another psychological operation. Don't you agree? I mean, it's been one psychological operation after another against our people in our
Yeah, great
country.
psychological effects. Yeah, with COVID, there's no doubt about it. Plus the killing of millions of people intentionally.
Yeah.
And then you had the likes of Fauci, who should be tried for treason, working with Wuhan laboratories and coming up
Yep.
uh, with the COVID that was spread then across the world. Yeah.
And do you think that's going to happen? Do you think that the people, all the people who are supposed need to be held accountable will be held accountable?
No, no, it's just going to take up too much money and time. I think they're going to take the top tier people that really dictated a lot of this.
And 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 so moving into the future, let's say that those top people that you're talking about are actually held accountable. That's Do you believe the path to setting other things on the right path for the future for our country on the lower levels?
Oh, I think it will. I think with the Charlie Kirk assassination and the expansion of the Turning Point USA, we're trying to get it at West Point right now, by the way, have a
Oh,
chapter at West
awesome.
Point for the cadets. Yeah, that's this Charlie Kirk assassination has changed so much, particularly
Mhm.
now with the young people that want to form chapters all over the place, not only in
Yes,
colleges but high schools.
yes.
And so that's been a turning point. I mean, Turning Point USA has
Literally.
been a turning point in America.
Yeah, exactly. And so your foundation, Stand Up America, the US Foundation,
Right,
um, I think you started that in 2005, if I remember
right.
what I was.
Yeah,
Tell me about that and the evolution of that. And that there's so much information there. I spent hours and barely even, got through
right.
the wealth of information.
Well, again, it was sort of like an epiphany. And when General McInerney and I and Admiral Lyons were meeting in Washington during the Benghazi situation, where we saw Hillary Clinton lie to Congress, Leon Panetta a lie in Congress, General Dempsey lie to Congress that we didn't have the assets to do the rescue operation when we did. They totally lied. They were never held accountable for that. Um, and so that sort of triggered everything, the Benghazi issue.
Hmm. And going back to that, I've never spoken to somebody of your caliber who understood let's just take Benghazi, for instance, who understood the deception that
Mhm.
cost people's lives and
Right.
was devastating. How is it for someone with your caliber can know that they got away with something so horrible?
Well, it was obvious to us that knew because Admiral Lyons and Joel McInerney, we interviewed some of the people on duty that day and night at Ramstein Air Force Base, Central Command in Tampa, uh, the fleet that we had in the Mediterranean, the aircraft we had in Italy and in Spain, uh, and the fleet had combat Marines on board in the Mediterranean, and they were ready to launch. But Hillary Clinton took over the operation from the Pentagon. And that's when they declared, well, we didn't have the assets. She didn't want to go in because she knows she was implicated in what happened in Benghazi. That's the most evil woman I know in the world. Hillary Clinton. Evil, total evil.
Well, I'm hope and pray that all of that will be uncovered and exposed,
Has
all
been
those
already,
truths.
but has been already. We just have to do something about it.
Excellent. That's what I love to hear. And so, a couple other points I just wanted to touch on. So, also in 2017, you were the person somehow that got Putin and Donald Trump together for the first time.
Right.
What the heck? How did that happen?
Well, Mikhail Bogdanov was the Putin's top guy for the Middle East. And I had met on his request to meet at the Russian embassy in Paris when I was over there. And so one of my assistants who was with me came to me at breakfast one morning. And he said, they want to know if you'll meet with the Russian ambassador this afternoon. I said, what about? He said, well, I don't know. I think it's about the Middle East or something. So we got Uber, left the hotel, went over to the Russian embassy. So we got to the front of the Russian embassy, which is a gigantic block in Paris, by the way. It's a very big embassy. And no guards, no security. We went up to the gate, pressed a button. A young Russian woman comes on, and we introduced ourselves. And she says, would you go around the corner and come in the back entrance? So we walked down a half a block, took a left, another block, took a left, came back into the back entrance to the Russian embassy. So we walked in again. Now, what's interesting, all of our embassies at that time had guards, guardrails, ramps you couldn't get through, Marines, no security at the Russian embassy. And there's a story
Wow.
about that too. So anyhow, we pressed the button, and out comes this young blonde assistant there at the embassy, and she says, "Come in, the ambassador's waiting for you." So we walked in again, no security, no pat downs, nothing. And she says, "The ambassador's back here." So she led us back to this room. So we walked into this room, and here's these three Russians. They stand up and they come out to meet me. And so I said, "Как вы поживаете? Очень хорошо, спасибо." So I'm talking to them in Russian. And they're going, I can't believe this guy's talking to us in Russian. So they come up and answer me in Russian, and they shook my hand. And so anyhow, it turned out to be Mikhail Bogdanov. It wasn't the Russian ambassador. It was the top guy for Putin in the Middle East. That was a year. And then a year later, he invited me to speak to the Valdai conference over there. Valdai is what they're having now in Sochi, by the way, this week. They're the think tank, like Heritage is for us, Heritage Corp Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the first speakers of the day. And then the second afternoon, this sounds like James Bond, by the way. A gentleman
Mhm.
by the name of Alistair Crook comes up to me and he says, "The president wants to meet you at 4 o'clock at the foreign ministry." I said, "The only president is Putin." So anyhow, Alistair was MI6 out of England. Had retired in Tuscany, and he was there as a guest speaker as well. But anyhow, he had liaison from the foreign ministry to me to be at the foreign ministry at 4 o'clock that afternoon. So it was only about 2 blocks away from our hotel. Nicest hotel, by the way, I've ever stayed at. It wasn't 5 stars; it was 6 stars in Moscow. Unbelievable.
Wow. Wow.
So anyhow, we go up to the seventh floor. What's interesting, the head of the foreign ministry for Russia is on the seventh floor. The head of our State Department is on the seventh floor in Washington, D.C. What the parallel is there. So anyhow, we got in there and we started talking and renewing our from Paris, and they had a Russian interpreter there and a couple staff members from the foreign ministry. So I got to thinking. It was like I was inspired. Something was coming into my head. I turned to Mikhail and I said, "Why don't we do a Reykjavik, Iceland, like Reagan and Gorbachev did?" And so the young woman who was foreign ministry, she was the head of the American desk. She's thinking. I could see her thinking. She says, "Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we have it at? I think it was the G10. It's going to be in June of 2017." And she says, "Why don't we do it then?" I says, "Well, that would be great." So I returned from Moscow and sent a message to some of my friends at the White House. And I said, Putin would like to meet President Trump in June. And then it happened. It was
Wow.
incredible.
That is wild. And why do you think there was no security?
At the embassies,
Yeah.
it goes back to Beirut, Lebanon. When our head of CIA was captured and killed by Hezbollah back then, Black September. And so anyhow, these stupid guys in Hezbollah, with their headquarters was in southern Beirut, the Russian embassy got word they were going to try to kidnap 2 Russians. So the ambassador sent a Mercedes Benz down, kidnapped one of the Hezbollah guys, cut off his testicles, stuffed them in his mouth, and delivered him back to the Russian or to the Hamas headquarters. A note was on there in Russian. "You ever touch a Russian, this is what's going to happen to you."
Oh.
From that day on, the embassies of Russia never needed any securities. They sent a message: "You touch a Russian, it's going to happen to you." That story's never
Holy.
been published. That story's never been published, by the way.
Wow. That talk about that's one for the books. I tell you
Yeah,
there. I
yeah.
love that. So I have two more questions. So I read that you had talked about the Q operation, and I have a quote. I'm going
About
to
what?
read it. The Q operation, the
Yeah.
Q military, and I have a quote, and I want to see if it's really your quote.
Okay.
Um, it's a legitimate source that releases real intelligence, fact-based intelligence to the public. Is that because I happen to be a big proponent myself. And so I saw that and I had to write it down and ask your opinion. on that too.
Well, I've been quoted as being the head of QAnon, which I'm not. I don't know anybody in QAnon. I got their emails that just like everybody else did. So that's it.
But you feel like it's a legit type of thing?
Oh yeah, they came
Communicating?
out. I think it was some retired military intelligence officers that were Q, and they operated out of Northern Virginia.
Well, and it's a communication to the public
Yeah,
through.
and through emails. Yeah, and that's all I got. But I was never head of Q, and I wasn't a part of it. I've been accused of it, but I was not. Okay, last
Well,
question, then I got to go.
yes, last question. So the last question is just about s- your spirituality and your, your feeling about this all being part of a divine type of thing as well, the world with which we are living in now.
Right.
I would just love your thoughts about that.
Well, if you read one of my books, America's Endgame for the 21st Century, that was written over 2 years ago, the first
Uh-huh.
chapter or two is all about the spiritual awakening of America. Until we have a spiritual awakening, we're never going to get back to what we should be or what we were. And that's trust, okay?
Hmm.
Trustworthiness, honesty,
Yes.
the spiritual thing. And I'm a big believer, absolutely. I was raised a good Catholic boy by the nuns, and I still hold those spiritual values I had when I was even an acolyte and an altar boy at a very young age. So, anyhow, very
And I just have
important.
it's very important. And I have to tell you this, that as the different people that I've talked to from all over the country have different lives, but that's the one thing that is common amongst the people who can see what is
Yeah,
happening now is that heightened sense of spirituality and their connection
right.
with God. And it's not a coincidence, obviously. Do you think?
No, it's just a divine happening. That's all I would call it. And very timely.
It is. And so if someone were to start out with just one of your books to start out with, which
Yeah.
book would you say would be the
I
best
think
to start out
America's
with?
Endgame for the 21st century.
Okay, that's wonderful. And I will end it there and just say to you again, thank you. And
If
it's
if you
overwhelming.
message me your email, I'm going to send you a complimentary book.
My day just got
You can
better.
add you can add to your wall there. But anyhow, Alan, it's been great. Thank you for inviting me, and we can do it again if you'd like.
I would love it. Are you kidding me? Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been a joy and a pleasure, and you're an icon and a thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your time with me. I just so grateful.
Okay, Alan, take care.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye
Thank you
bye.
so